Did you know that 70% of people remember stories with strong conflict better than those without? That's right. Conflict is not just a story element, it's the key to captivating your audience. But here's a jaw-dropper. According to a study in psychological science, our brains are wired to crave conflict. When we encounter a story with tension and resolution, our brains light up with pleasure. So what makes conflict so irresistible? Why does it hold the power to keep us glued to a book, movie, or show? In this video, we're diving deep into the science behind story conflict. You'll learn why conflict works, how to craft unforgettable antagonists, and the secrets to creating plot twists that leave your audience stunned. Ready to transform your storytelling skills? Let's unlock the secrets of conflict and turn your stories into unforgettable experiences. Stay tuned to find out how conflict can be your story's greatest ally. Chapter 1. The DNA of conflict. Why our brains crave it. Humans are hardwired for conflict. It's in our DNA. But why do our brains crave conflict in stories? The answer lies deep in our psychology. According to a study published in Psychological Science, our brains release dopamine, a feel-good chemical, when we experience conflict and resolution in narratives. This is because conflict engages the brain's reward system. We're not just passive consumers of stories. Our brains are actively working to predict outcomes and resolve tension. Think about it. Have you ever been on the edge of your seat during a movie, heart racing, waiting to see what happens next? That's your brain at work. It's wired to seek out problems and solutions. Story conflict taps into this natural instinct. We find ourselves hooked because our brains are rewarded every time a story takes us through conflict and resolution. Moreover, conflict isn't just about big, explosive events. It can be as subtle as a character's internal struggle. Psychologist Jerome Bruner suggests that humans are narrative creatures. We make sense of the world through stories, and conflict is the core of those stories. Without it, there's nothing to solve, nothing to learn, and nothing to keep us interested. So the next time you craft a story, remember this. Conflict isn't just a tool. It's the heart of what makes a narrative engaging. It's what our brains are wired to seek, and it's what keeps your audience coming back for more. Chapter 2. Antagonists and protagonists, the chemistry of opposition. At the core of every great story is a clash between the protagonist and the antagonist. But it's not just about good versus evil. It's about the chemistry of opposition. Think of it like a chemical reaction. Two opposing forces collide, creating something entirely new and dynamic. The key to creating this chemistry lies in making the goals of your protagonist and antagonist mutually exclusive. When their desires are irreconcilable, conflict naturally arises. For example, in the Harry Potter series, Harry's quest to defeat Voldemort is in direct opposition to Voldemort's desire for immortality and domination. Their conflicting goals fuel the entire narrative. But here's an interesting twist. Sometimes the best antagonists are those who aren't purely evil. They might even share some traits with the protagonist. This makes the conflict richer and more nuanced. The late author John Gardner once said, "The best antagonist is a character who believes they are the hero of their own story." This creates a situation where both sides believe they are right, making the conflict more relatable and intense. To deepen this opposition, consider giving your antagonist strengths that challenge the protagonist's weaknesses. This creates a more balanced and engaging struggle. The chemistry of opposition isn't just about clashing, it's about creating a dynamic interplay that drives the story forward. Chapter 3. Internal battles, the silent wars within characters. While external conflict is often the most visible, internal conflict is where the magic really happens. It's the silent war that rages within a character, and it's what makes them feel real. Have you ever read a story where a character's internal struggle drew you in more than the actual plot? That's the power of internal conflict. Internal conflict often revolves around a character's values, desires, and fears. These are the things that make us human, and they're what make characters relatable. A study from the University of Southern California found that stories with strong internal conflict lead to a higher level of emotional engagement from audiences. Why? Because we see a reflection of our own struggles in those characters. Take Hamlet, for example. His internal struggle, whether to avenge his father's death or remain morally pure, drives the entire narrative. This internal battle is far more compelling than any sword fight could ever be. It's relatable because it taps into the universal human experience of doubt and moral conflict. To create internal conflict in your own stories, focus on your character's deepest fears and desires. What do they want most? What are they afraid to lose? The push and pull between these forces create the kind of tension that keeps readers invested. Remember, the most powerful battles often happen within. Chapter 4, Conflict Arcs, the invisible blueprint of great stories. Every great story has a conflict arc, an invisible blueprint that shapes the narrative. But what exactly is a conflict arc? It's the path that conflict takes as it develops and resolves. Without a well-defined conflict arc, a story can feel aimless or flat. The arc is what gives the story structure and momentum. One of the most common conflict arcs is the rising arc. This is where tension gradually builds, leading to a climax and then resolves. Think of it like climbing a mountain. The higher you go, the more intense the conflict becomes until it reaches a peak. According to The Hero with 1,000 Faces by Joseph Campbell, this rising arc mirrors the hero's journey, a universal pattern in storytelling. But there's more than one way to structure a conflict arc. For example, you can have a cyclical arc where conflict rises and falls repeatedly, keeping the audience on their toes. Or you might choose a falling arc where the story begins with high tension that gradually de-escalates, leaving the audience with a sense of resolution and closure. The key to a successful conflict arc is to keep the stakes high. The higher the stakes, the more invested your audience will be. And don't be afraid to subvert expectations. Sometimes breaking away from traditional arcs can create surprising and memorable stories. Before we dive into the next chapter, where we'll explore the art of plot twists and unexpected conflict, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss out on any of this storytelling gold. Chapter 5, Twists and Turns, the Art of Unexpected Conflict. Plot twists are the spice that can turn a good story into a great one. They're the moments that leave your audience gasping, wide-eyed, and eager for more. But what makes a plot twist truly effective? The key lies in setting up an unexpected conflict that challenges everything your audience thought they knew. A study by the University of Toronto found that stories with well-executed twists activate more areas of the brain than straightforward narratives. This is because plot twists force the brain to reevaluate information and adjust its understanding. It's like giving your audience a puzzle to solve, and who doesn't love a good puzzle? One strategy to create a compelling twist is to play with expectations. Lead your audience down one path only to pull the rug out from under them at the last moment. But remember, a twist shouldn't come out of nowhere. It needs to be surprising yet inevitable in hindsight. When done right, the audience should be able to look back and see the clues you planted along the way. Another approach is to introduce a twist that adds a new layer of conflict. For instance, in Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn, the mid-story twist reveals a new perspective that completely shifts the conflict. This twist doesn't just shock, it deepens the narrative, making the story more complex and engaging. To master the art of twists, focus on misdirection and revelation. Keep your audience guessing, but don't make the twist feel forced. A good twist should feel like the natural yet surprising evolution of the story. The goal is to challenge your audience's assumptions and keep them hooked. Chapter 6, Sympathetic Villains. When conflict isn't black and white, not all villains need to be pure evil. In fact, some of the most memorable antagonists are those who blur the line between good and bad. A sympathetic villain can add depth to your story and create a conflict that feels more real and engaging. Research from the University of Southern California shows that audiences are more likely to be engaged with stories where the antagonist is relatable or has understandable motives. Why? Because a villain with depth challenges the protagonist and the audience to consider multiple perspectives. Take Black Panther's Killmonger, for example. He's a villain, but his motivations are rooted in a desire to right historical wrongs. This makes him more than just an obstacle for the hero. He's a character with a cause that many viewers can sympathize with. The conflict between him and the protagonist, T'Challa, is richer because it's not just about good versus evil. It's about different ideologies clashing. To create a sympathetic villain, start by giving them a backstory that explains their actions. What drives them? What do they want, and why do they believe they're justified? When the audience understands the villain's perspective, the conflict becomes more complex and the story more engaging. Moreover, a well-crafted villain can also serve as a mirror to the protagonist. Their flaws, desires, and fears might reflect those of the hero, creating a conflict that is not just external, but deeply personal. This kind of conflict resonates more with audiences because it feels real and relatable. Chapter 7, Conflict Resolution, the Psychology of Satisfying Endings. A story's resolution can make or break the entire experience. It's the moment when all the tension and conflict come to a head, and how you resolve it will determine whether your audience walks away satisfied or disappointed. So, what's the secret to a great ending? One key strategy is to ensure that the resolution aligns with the story's emotional journey. According to a study published in the Journal of Consumer Research, stories that end with a resolution that feels emotionally appropriate are more satisfying to audiences. This doesn't necessarily mean a happy ending, it means an ending that fits the narrative. Consider the ending of The Shawshank Redemption. The resolution is deeply satisfying, not because it's a happy ending, but because it aligns perfectly with the themes of hope and perseverance that run through the story. The audience feels a sense of closure because the resolution is the natural culmination of the conflict. Another strategy is to leave some elements of the story open-ended. This invites the audience to think about the story long after it's over, keeping them engaged with the narrative. However, balance is key. Too many unresolved threads can leave the audience feeling frustrated rather than intrigued. When crafting your resolution, focus on the emotional payoff. Your audience has invested time and energy into your story, so the resolution should reward that investment. Whether it's through a final twist, a poignant conclusion, or a tragic end, the resolution should feel earned and meaningful. Chapter 8, Beyond the Page, How Conflict Translates in Visual Storytelling. Conflict isn't just about words on a page, it's about how those words come to life visually. In visual storytelling, like films and comics, conflict takes on a new dimension. The challenge is to convey tension and emotion through images as much as through dialogue and narrative. One of the most effective strategies is to use visual metaphors to represent conflict. For example, in The Godfather, the recurring image of doors closing represents Michael Corleone's gradual entrapment in the family business. These visual cues add depth to the conflict and enhance the audience's understanding of the character's journey. Another powerful tool is the use of framing and composition. In Citizen Kane, Orson Welles famously used deep focus shots to create a sense of isolation and conflict within a single frame. By placing characters at opposite ends of a large room, he visually represented the emotional distance between them. This kind of visual storytelling adds layers to the narrative and makes the conflict more impactful. Color and lighting also play a crucial role in visual conflict. Dark, shadowy lighting can create a sense of foreboding, while bright, harsh lights can heighten tension. In Mad Max, Fury Road, the stark contrast between the vibrant desert and the grim, shadowy interiors of Immortan Joe's citadel visually represents the clash between freedom and oppression. To master visual conflict, think beyond the script. Consider how every element, lighting, composition, color, and even sound, can contribute to the tension and drama of your story. The goal is to create a visual experience that resonates with the audience on an emotional level. If you've enjoyed these insights into the science of story conflict, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We've got more storytelling strategies coming your way.